All right, you're very welcome to the RTÉ Soccer Podcast. I'm Raf Diallo. Today we'll be reflecting back to the Republic of Ireland's boring draw against Luxembourg. That's the manager's description, not mine, although I don't disagree with it either. We'll also pick through the women's squad name for the two friendlies against the USA. I'll be chatting to Rachel Graham about the latter and also her Shelbourne side and Athlone having their huge fixture called off due to the biblical levels of rain in Dublin on Saturday. And I can attest to that. It was certainly biblical. That's not exaggeration at all. But right now I'm joined by Richie Towell, Keith Treacy and journalist Barry Landy, who covers all things Drogheda, to talk League of Ireland, the boys in green, and much more. Lads, how are we?
Oh, good, Raf.
Having us.
Good stuff. Now, first off, before we get to all of that, RT Sport understands Brentford first team coach Keith Andrews is a candidate for the vacant head coach role at G Tech Community Stadium, following Thomas Frank taking the Tottenham Hotspur job, but it is an ongoing process and an imminent appointment is not expected. And Keith Andrews has been set piece coach at Brentford since last summer, as well as working at Sheffield United before that, and also, as we know, was Stephen Kenny's longtime assistant with the Republic of Ireland. And Keith, I suppose your reaction when you saw his name being floated, first of all, obviously you know him from your time, not just with Ireland, but Blackburn as well. Like, how big an opportunity this is if it does happen?
I think it's a massive opportunity, Raf, to be 44 years of age and being thrown around to potentially being the next manager of Brentford it's a huge step forward. I don't think Keith is a very realistic bloke, very clever bloke. I don't think he'd be underestimating the opportunity if it does come along. But the fact that he hasn't gone to Spurs with Thomas Frank, you're thinking, has he been told something? But I believe there's meetings taking place in the background now. And look, a lot of people have said to me, how can a set-piece coach become the coach or the manager of a club? I wouldn't put too much weight behind the title set-piece coach. I think he does an awful lot more than just drill them for when they're defending or attacking set pieces. As you said, Raf, he's learned under Stephen Kenny, he's learned under Chris Wilder. He will feel he's earned his stripes. And from an Irish point of view, if he does get it, it's Irish coaching is in a brilliant place at the minute. Get domestically with Stephen Bradley, Damien Duff, Kevin Doherty as well should be thrown into the mix. He's turning up trees at the minute. And obviously across the water, there's a couple of lads as well. Obviously Keith, Kieran McKenna has just dropped out of the Premier League. So it's in a good place. I really, really hope Keith does get the job, because I've been lucky enough to work with Keith. I was his roommate for the Irish B team when we played Forest and Dalymount, played him at Blackburn, and he's really old school in his beliefs and that he won't take anything less than 100%. He will obviously have tactics and phases of play and stuff he will add to the mixer, but I think his underlying message will be outwork the opposition, and then the talent will come to the forefront. So, yeah, old school mentality with modern ideas. And yeah, I'm sitting here with my fingers crossed, hoping he gets the job. I'd love to see him get a crack at the whip, Raf.
Yeah, so you kind of saw it, because it can be hard to say, like in a dressing room, sometimes obviously you have your role as a player, but could you kind of see that there is a future coach or a future manager in there, and the way he thinks about the game, or the way he looks after himself, or the way he sort of talks to people around the dressing room?
It's always hard to tell, because I was really young. I think I was 19 when Keith came to Blackburn Rovers. Keith would have been a couple of years older than me. But one thing I really liked about Keith, there was certain senior players, and I'm sure Richie would have come across this when he was younger, certain senior players that would be very quick to give you an earful if you did something wrong in training, and he wouldn't go after certain players because they might get a bit back. But Keith would give me a bit when I did something wrong. He would go after Craig Bellamy, he would go after Santa Cruz, whoever it was. Keith just has that mentality. You need to do better, and I love that he treated everybody the same in the way he would dish out these earfuls. So, yeah, look, there was little bits in it, Raf, the way he looked after himself. Obviously, coming from the lower divisions, from MK Don straight into the Premier League, I think he always had that feeling that he had a bit to prove, being Paul Ince's boy coming in. So, yeah, tactically, I think he'll be absolutely fine. As I said, he's been learning under some really good managers over the last couple of years. Yeah, did I see it as a player? Probably not, but again, you're not going around with your ears pricked up going, I wonder who will be a manager at the end of the day. But yeah, I wouldn't say I was surprised, but definitely didn't see it coming either.
Yeah, how would Craig Bellamy, who seems like he's a decent guy actually, how does he take getting the bollock? And he seems kind of a quite reactive figure.
Yeah, very rarely would Craig not have something to say for himself, even if he was in the wrong. And look, Bellers was a brilliant player. He drove standards as well. He was one of those players, but initially, I think if you were to have a pop off him on the pitch, he would have a pop straight off and maybe calm down later on. But I remember some of the early days with him and Lorenzo Amoruso having a little ongoing battles. They were brilliant to watch, and yeah, Keith got straight into the mixer there and didn't hold back himself.
Yeah, and in terms of Keith Andrews' work last season, so according to Sky Sports' Lewis Jones, he's been admired for the role he's done in terms of set pieces. Brentford scored 13 set piece goals last season. That's the third highest in terms of expected goals from set pieces as well. And then also credited with Brentford's very fast start in games, which was kind of noticeable through the season. But just something Keith mentioned there, Richie, which is like when you're in and around the dressing room, you're looking at maybe, and when you think about like who might have the characteristics to be a future manager from your time in Dundalk or Rovers? Are there some people that have been or were obvious to you that they had the credentials maybe, and if they wanted to go into management, that it would suit them?
Yeah, it's normally the lads who are probably a little bit more vocal in the dressing room. Obviously, I had Rudy Higgins and Stevie O'Donnell at Dundalk, and they were real leaders in their dressing room. Raf Diallo, and they loved football, even when they were sitting in the dressing room before training and after training, non-stop talking about football, talking about tactics, talking about set plays, talking about everything. Sometimes you'd be like, give us a rest here, will you? Like, do you know what I mean? You're on your way to a game, they'd be talking about it. After a game, they'd be talking about it. So some players just absolutely live and breathe it, they do. And the likes of Stevie O'Donnell, Rudy Higgins, you could see that they didn't just love playing football, they loved the idea of the tactics behind it and like how to beat another team and stuff like that. So you could see that certain players were going to go into management, but I always found it was always the little bit more vocal lads in the dressing room. So if you had somebody who would speak a little bit more than others, that they kind of enjoyed that presence being in the dressing room, like, I'm kind of the man a little bit. And you kind of need that, a little bit of a chip on your shoulder if you want to be a manager. I think you have to be able to hold the dressing room. You have to be able to speak clearly, and you have to have lads respect. And the two lads who I mentioned, they were definitely two of them.
Yeah, and Barry, I suppose the wider context at Brentford as well, if whether it's Keith Andrews or whoever else, because Caoimhin Kelleher has joined now. Thomas Frank has gone to Tottenham Hotspur. He's been such a key part in driving what's been happening there at the club. But then at the same time, there's players potentially going out the door. Mbeumo, I think Vissa has his suitors as well. Nathan Collins as well has been linked with a few big clubs, the likes of Newcastle, Spurs, Arsenal, Liverpool. So if Keith Andrews walks in there, very different context. But Caoimhin Kelleher, the club he's joining is different to the one he actually signed for only a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, Raf, you'd have to wonder whether Caoimhin Kelleher and his representatives had an idea or an inkling that Thomas Frank might be on the way. He's one of those managers that's consistently been linked to other jobs. I think he's been linked with Spurs before. He's had conversations with Man United, I think, before Ruben Amorim was appointed, maybe, or perhaps it was Ten Hag. So he is one of those in-demand managers. And yeah, Brentford had players like Mbeumo and Vissa, as you say, and Nathan Collins, who impressed in the last couple of seasons. So you'd always kind of wonder how that's going to develop. In recent years, they haven't sold too many. Ivan Toney really is the only big departure from Brentford. So we could see a higher turnover this year, firstly from the manager and now from players as well. It could be a very different Brentford. And if Keith goes in or whoever goes in, it'll be a tricky job to kind of replicate immediately anyway what Thomas Frank was doing. And hopefully not from an Irish perspective, but Brentford don't find themselves in a little bit of trouble next season, because we want to see Caoimhin Kelleher operating, and Nathan Collins as well, actually operating towards the top half of the Premier League table.
Yeah, let's see how that all plays out over the next wee while. But also in terms of Irish coaches abroad, League One's Cardiff City have confirmed the appointment of Barry Murphy as their new head coach. So he's highly rated. He's been in the Manchester City system, and he's also managed Rochdale before. Obviously, from the surname, anyone who's into GA will know he's obviously the son of a great Cork hurling great. Also, Newcastle Under-21 lead coach Diarmuid O'Carroll, who's born in Killarney, is now first team coach at Sparta Prague. So that's all good movements on that front of you. Sorry. Yeah.
I played with Diarmuid.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, he was at Celtic, he was, yeah.
Oh, very good. Yeah, because I saw he was at Celtic at one point. I just didn't realise he crossed over them.
He did, yeah, striker. Good player there, was good fella as well, really good fella. Keith, I'm sure you probably played with him as well, did you?
I don't think so. I can't remember, but I'm bleeding awful. Like, Raf will pull a stat out now and say, you actually did, Keith, and I make myself look foolish, but I can't remember it off the top of my head.
I didn't know that he's gone to. Where is he gone now?
Sparta Prague. He's going to be. He's got joined the first team coaching staff there. So that was just confirmed yesterday.
And what about Conor Hourahan, Raf? 34 years of age, manager Barnsley.
Yeah, so there's a lot of good movement there in terms of Irish coaches, which is good to see as well. But
if I remember correctly as well, Raf, sorry, Diarmuid O'Carroll, I think it's not the first time he's gone sort of continental. I think he played in Iceland as a young player as well, briefly.
Valur, I think. Yeah.
So he's building up a decent CV in terms of going out into different places.
Yeah. And speaking of Iceland, given that's where our own manager comes from, so he wasn't best entertained against Luxembourg last week in the 0-0 draw in that last friendly international. So this is what he had to say to Tony O'Donoghue on the pitch afterwards.
Let's be honest, we're not happy with this performance. It's good to keep a clean sheet, the first one since I came. But yeah, we all felt first half we were sloppy. The game was boring first half. It was all the good things we did against Senegal was missing, all the quick movements, the press, the ball speed. So sloppy. It changed in the second half, more tempo, won more duels, etc. But not good enough. We always like answers to questions, and this one is a negative one. So we at least know that.
All right, so that is Heimir Hallgrimsson, Republic of Ireland manager. So that's after the 0-0 draw against Luxembourg last week. And obviously, Richie, there was loads of optimism last week when we were talking about the Senegal game. The first half was so good, and now that's been punctured a little bit. But has it really changed your perspective about the direction of travel that Ireland are going in?
It's always the way, isn't it? We are really big in them up. And rightly so, because against Senegal, they were really good, especially the first half. Obviously, Senegal stepped up a little bit in the second half. And you can see Senegal went on and beat England then a couple of days later. So you can't underestimate that performance. It was excellent, it was. But you'd expect them then to bounce into the Luxembourg game. I thought they were going to come out of the traps flying, especially when I seen Parrott and Ferguson starting up front together. I was thinking, right, here we go. There's going to be loads of goals in the game. And yeah, as the manager said, it was anything but that. It was really boring. But I think we can still take a lot of positives from the two games. As I said, the first half performance, especially against Senegal, keeping the clean sheet against Luxembourg. Do you know what I love, Raf? I just love his honesty. I love Heimir's honesty. You can see he wears his heart on his sleeve, and he wants to do the best for the country. So I can still see all the fans are really behind the team now, and that's what we're going to need going forward, because as we've seen with performances that they can put in, if they do it, the nation will be behind them, and then it'll lead to good things. Like,
yeah, and in terms of the way the game was played, Barry, there's that emphasis on width, and especially the sort of cross-field balls. Say Dar O'Shea in particular, it was quite obvious. But also, what was more obvious in the Luxembourg game, there is a dearth of creativity, which I think I know is something you wanted to point out when certain players are missing, and there was a championship contingent that weren't there also.
Yeah, of course. Essentially, you were looking at Jason Knight, Killian Phillips, Will Smallbone, none of which really imposed themselves on the game and offered much in terms of creativity on the night. You know, we talk a lot about the strikers that Ireland have at their disposal now. As Richie said there, it's exciting seeing Ferguson and Troy Parrott start up front. You've Adamida in reserve as well. These are all guys who can finish. But it's one thing talking about Evan Ferguson's form at the moment and whatever. You know, a goal can change things for a striker, but if he doesn't get the service, that's not going to happen for him. And he certainly wasn't getting much service in the middle, you know, in terms of our build-up play and through balls and things like that on Tuesday. With Finn Azaz out of the team, I think that's a real issue. I think he's become such a crucial player for Ireland now, just in his ability to get on the ball and make these little passes and spot these little gaps. You mentioned Witt there. Festi Ebisele came on again and probably looked Ireland's most promising attacker for me. You know, he was taking on defenders, showing a bit of drive and a bit of determination and a bit of positivity, I think, late in the game. And he's done that several times now, I think, for Ireland. We're kind of getting to a point now where, you know, is he pushing for a start, or is Heimir going to continue using him more as an impact sub? But every time I see Festi play for Ireland, I'm always very impressed.
Yeah, and Keith, overall, your kind of assessment of the two games and what you made of it, and particularly the width, I know, as a former winger as well.
To be honest, Raf, I wouldn't put too much weight behind any of the friendlies. What Richie's saying is right. Senegal are a very good team when they're at full strength, but when they've got one eye on England and they put out there, it's probably kind to call that Senegal team a B team. We were decent in 45 minutes. The second 45 minutes we weren't too good, so yet to get a 90-minute performance over the two games. And the Luxembourg one in particular is one that is really, really great to me, because you look at the World Cup qualifying group. Obviously, Portugal and Hungary are, you know, that little bit better than us. But I look at those fixtures and think we'll play above ourselves, because we so often do. We'll put in that extra yard, that little bit more motivation. But then will we, like, it's a given. It has to be a given that we get 6 points against Armenia, Raf. And the way we played against Luxembourg just does not fill me with any confidence that we can do that. I suppose the bigger question in all of this is, after the 2 friendlies, am I more confident that we can qualify from this World Cup group? And I wouldn't say I am. I wasn't confident before the friendlies, and I'm still not confident now. The reason for that is the 3 units, the defence, the midfield, and the attacking. All the question marks are still there. For everybody says we have brilliant defensive players, Jake O'Brien, Collins, O'Shea. Yes, they are Premier League players, but we've only kept 2 clean sheets in our last 10 games. That's nowhere near good enough. We've only scored 8 goals in our last 10 games. That's not good enough for people that are telling me we've got really good strikers and we've got really good defenders. If we did, we'd be scoring a lot more goals and we'd be keeping a lot more clean sheets. Then you look at the midfield, we still can't keep the ball, Raf. So we can't be a possession-based team because we can't keep the ball under pressure. Anybody with a half-decent press can come and get rewards off of us. So, look, if we can't be a possession-based team, we're going to have to be extremely well drilled out of possession. And we're not extremely well drilled out of possession. Heimir could sit here and say, Keith, we've got hard at the beat. I take that on board. I do think we've got hard at the beat. I do think there's a little bit of progression there. But is there enough progression to go and nick a point off of Portugal and beat them at home, to be hungry? I'm not so sure, Raf. I think, as I say, I think we've got better, but I don't think we've made up the gulf in class. And we're getting thrown straight into the deep end. Hungary at home, Armenia away, first 2 games. Feels like it's going to need 6 points straight off the bat. And like I say, I'm sitting here and thinking I've very little confidence in this Ireland team doing that.
Yeah, because if we go back to the last time we played Armenia, which was the Nations League campaign, when it started with the 1-0 defeat there and ended with a fairly unconvincing 3-2 win over them at home. And then in between, we'd beaten Scotland 3-0. We think we played Ukraine in that group as well. After that, in September of 2022, you were on this podcast and you said you felt we were sleepwalking into possibly a disastrous Euro 2024 campaign. At that stage, we didn't know we had the French, the Dutch, and who was the other one? The Greeks as well, in terms of being a pot 4 team. It actually turned out to be, the pot 4 team was actually the worst performance we had and all that. So, going into it where we have, as you said, Portugal, Hungary, Armenia, Portugal, who are going to probably top that group, Hungary, who have more pedigree in recent times, and Armenia. Are you kind of worried that some supporters maybe are getting their hopes up a little bit going into it then?
Yeah, to be honest, Rafa, I don't want to be here because I feel like I've done this over the last couple of years with Stephen Kenny's Ireland and now Heimir's Ireland, and I'm just giving out and giving out and giving out. But I have to say what I see, and what I see is very, very little confidence in us moving forward. And look, that's, as I say, I do feel we're getting better. We've become harder to beat, which is no easy task. We've become harder to beat. That game against Luxembourg is probably one we could have lost under Stephen Kenny, and that's not a pop at Stephen Kenny. We would dominate the ball, dominate the game, and then all of a sudden, just like we did against Luxembourg and Armenia, we end up losing 1-0. So, look, I'm not sure how Heimir goes about it, because you would imagine Portugal are going to come here and have 70% of the ball, which, for me, we can't defend that well for that long and keep that amount of players out. The midfield that Portugal have is out of this world with the lads from PSG. The Hungarians will come and have the lion's share of the ball also. So, if we go after them, Raf, our press is not quite as good. Sometimes it's decent, sometimes it's quite lacklustre. So I have very little confidence in all aspects. And where people are confident is, we have good defenders now, Keith, but the stats aren't backing up that we have good defenders. I take the point that Nathan Collins is a brilliant centre-half for Brentford, but it's not the same Nathan Collins that turns up for Ireland. The one thing that gives me hope is that Barry has said that Finn Azaz will come back into the team. I hope Ogbenny hits a bit of form, because he was a very, very important player for Ireland before his injury at Ipswich. I hope Schmodics does the same, hits the ground running at Ipswich after his injury, and maybe Seamus Coleman, because when I look at that Ireland team, obviously the talent, the pool of talent is not quite there, but I think we lack leaders. When Seamus is not around, I really think we lack leaders. So I think there's a lot more negatives than positives. And to be honest, Raf, I was a little bit taken back to it, how much positivity there was coming out of the 2 friendlies. I didn't quite see it as the majority did.
Guilty. Anyway, don't just hold off on booking tickets to North America for next year for the moment. But anyway, let's turn to domestic matters. So Drogheda's expulsion from the Conference League, which of course is a major disappointment for the club. So yesterday, the Court of Arbitration for Sport rejected Drogheda United's appeal against their expulsion from the UEFA Conference League over the multi-club ownership rules. The Danish club side Silkeborg IF, who like Drogheda are also owned by the Travella Group, take priority due to their higher league position, and therefore they're the ones in Europe Obviously, the club released a statement as well yesterday, a lengthy one that you can read on rte.ie/sport, where there was an apology in there as well, but also just this sense that they believe the decision was unjust. But let's listen to Kevin Doherty as well, because he was very emotional afterwards when talking to John Kenny and the rest of the media scrum after the defeat to Shamrock Rovers last night.
You mentioned difficult day, obviously, with the news that you're no longer involved in the Conference League. How does that transfer then to the players? And did they find out about it long before kickoff?
Found out about it 5 minutes after me. Obviously, I think.
What was the feeling?
Devastation.
You told us on Friday that you had a very good case.
Yeah.
And you thought you were being kept in the loop as
well
about that. So were you confident?
Yeah, very confident, yeah. Very confident. Yeah, we're absolutely pro-life. As I said, there's times where, like, we've had tough times here over the years, like, for different reasons. As I said, everything around the club and on the pitch is on the up, and I won't change. Today's thing with Cass doesn't change that. How positive. Look, let's have a look around you tonight. How positive that is. But it was certainly something that I had to dig deep in myself today, to go into a dressing room and try and motivate lads to play a football match. Mm-hmm.
How are the players? Sorry, how are the players doing? Because I assume, this is something probably in pre-season you spoke about, and the circle in the diary is a day to look forward to. How do you lift them from that?
Well, I think it was proven tonight that we can do it. As I said, that result was taken away from us tonight. Let the whole country and social media and everyone else look at it, because they'll be the judge, jury and executioner on this stuff, because nothing else seems to happen for these things that happen in these games. But I think, to answer your question, I think what we did on the pitch tonight shows you that we've managed to. Now, these things might take a bit of time, and it will, but we really like to go out and put in that performance after that. And again, we're going into it. You're missing Owen Lamb, you're missing Alicia, you're missing. Like, we're down a lot of bodies. Rovers decided missing a few, but like, come on, look what Rovers can do. And honestly, I really am, and like, I'm so proud of the players. Like, I'm just sick that the ironic thing is the reason we're playing this game tonight. We're playing 5 games in 14 days, and we're picking up knocks, we're picking up injuries. You see tonight, George Cooper was about to burst. I had to take him off. Dougie the same, played 90 on Friday. And I said the ironic thing about tonight is there's a reason why we're playing this game, and now we'll have what?
2 in July.
Yeah, one league game.
All right, so that's Kevin Doherty there, Drogheda United manager, obviously summing up the sense of feeling after they were excluded from this year, or the upcoming UEFA Conference League, and obviously the draw for that competition is happening today as well. But Barry, I suppose the other bit of irony as well is Silkeborg, the other club, the Danish club that are in this multi-club model under Trivela, their supporters, and you've kind of found that out firsthand when you were over in Denmark, they were not initially keen to be part of this structure either, or in terms of this takeover, they weren't in favour of it.
No, they weren't keen at the time last December when it happened, and they're not particularly keen now, to be honest. Silkeborg are a quite successful team in the Danish Superliga, self-sustainable as well. They've achieved a lot off their own bat. They won the Danish Cup last year before Trivela bought them. They qualified for the Conference League 2 of the previous 3 seasons. So they didn't feel like they had to be taken over, and they didn't feel like they needed any of the benefits that come with a multi-club ownership model. So the feeling in Silkeborg towards Drogheda is one of real non-concern, really. They're not concerned or bothered about Drogheda or Walsall or what they do. They're just concerned with doing their own thing. Like, there are clubs in Denmark that have been burned before, I think, in terms of multi-club ownership. There's a couple who've suffered upheaval and relegation after being taken over by US groups in recent years, and there's suspicion around, I guess, the motives and the capabilities of these owners. So that fed into the Silkeborg feeling as well. But even their manager was asked about this Drogheda issue around the time of their playoff when they qualified on June 1st, and he just said it's nothing to do with us. They just really weren't fussed at all. There was another interesting little bit from Kevin that ran on after that clip ended there. he mentioned that when Silkeborg won that game on June 1st to qualify for the Conference League, he said he was delighted for them. He said fair play, because the information that he'd been given from people at Drogheda was that they would qualify and that the whole issue would be sorted out, and hasn't turned out to be that way.
Yeah, because he said that on Friday, and John Kenny also was speaking to him, and he said that he felt that Drogheda had a very strong case when it came to the CAS appeal. Obviously, it didn't really play out that way, but their appeal and what it was often sort of based on in terms of trying to get it over the line was centered on the deadline for blind trust ownership. So this was moved initially from the 3rd of June to the 1st of March, and Drogheda were sort of caught out with that, but they also felt it was not, in their view, it wasn't communicated well. So that's where it's sort of centered on. And other clubs, some major clubs around Europe have sort of got around this by using the blind trust model.
Yeah, so that was last year. So both the City Football Group and Ineos, who own Manchester United and Nice, both used blind trusts last year to allow Man City and Girona into the Champions League and Man United and Nice into the Europa League. So last year that deadline was June 3rd. Those groups met that deadline. This year, UEFA had decided to bring it forward to March 1st, and that's what's caught Drogheda United out, or so they said in their appeal to CAS. Now, there's another aspect to this story. John Fallon actually had it last night. The FAI received notification that this change was happening in October last year. There is a circular letter from UEFA that was sent out to all national associations confirming this was going to be the case. So I think there's more to come from this story, Raf, to be honest. They're going to lose out on a minimum 525k, which is a huge investment for Drogheda United and a club of its size and its operating budget. So I think we're going to be hearing a lot more of that. The club actually said in their statements yesterday that there would be more to say on this in the coming days and weeks, and I think we are going to hear more. I think they're keen to make it clear that Troivella Group and Drogheda are not necessarily to blame here.
In terms of you mentioned the 500,000 minimum that they're losing out on. How much of their budgeting for this season, and even in the sort of medium term, would have been predicated on the expectation that they're getting this level of European funding?
To an extent, yes. Troivella, I would say, are not reckless spenders, in that I think probably their prudence in the last 18 months will probably stand to them due to this happening. Like, they still have the second lowest budget in the league. Last year they had the lowest. This year they're spending slightly more than Sligo Rovers on player wages, but you're talking hundreds, maybe $1,000 more a week. It's not a lot. Troivella, I understand as well, are covering the hefty legal costs. So it's a 6-figure sum in terms of the spend, in terms of the 3 law firms that they engaged to talk to UEFA and subsequently to deal with the CAS hearing. So that's coming out of Troivella as opposed to Drogheda United themselves. So that shouldn't be too big of a worry for the club itself. But I would imagine now Drogheda might find themselves in a situation where they could look to cash in on some assets this summer, whereas they might have looked to keep them otherwise. I think Warren Davis probably the most likely sale at this point. He's the top scorer this season, 20 years old. There's multiple clubs, I understand, in the UK and in Europe looking at him, and he's a player who could potentially fetch, a 6-figure sum for Drogheda. So there might be a little bit of movement there in trying to recoup some of that expected income from Europe.
Yeah, and in terms of the mood in the town as well, obviously we'll talk about the Shamrock Rovers game as well, because they did perform quite well even in defeat. But within the town, in terms of their view of Drogheda being part of a multi-club structure in light of what's happened over the last few days, has there been much of a shift?
No, to be honest. Drogheda's attitude towards Troivella and the multi-club ownership model is very different to Silkeborg, as I outlined earlier. Drogheda are the smallest of these 3 clubs. They see only benefits really, as opposed to any negative. I mean, there's a lot of Drogheda fans now who've all of a sudden taken an interest in Walsall and will almost claim to be Walsall supporters because they have this link now. They've got Douglas James Taylor on loan from Walsall, Alicia Hui, who I think are 2 of the league's best players, not just Drogheda's best players. And Evan Weir's gone the other way as well. Not so much crossover with Silkeborg, but I think that was related to the fact that there was this potential European clash, and I think Travella wanted to keep them separate. But no, the mood last night at the game was not really somber. Unusual, I would say, but not somber. It was more defiant than anything else. And there was, a few anti-UEFA chants from the crowd. There was no anti-Trivella chants. There's been no suggestion that, these guys won't be welcome back here anytime soon. It's all quite measured, I would say. And especially now with more details emerging about how this all has come about, I think Drogheda's attention is more based on these associations have let us down as opposed to our owners.
Yeah, and Richie, I suppose you know what it's like to go on a European adventure with a club, and I imagine you can sympathise with the players within that Drogheda United dressing room who would have been dreaming of, testing themselves out against opposition from other parts of the continent.
That's exactly what it would have been, Raf, as well. It would have been a dream for them, They stayed in the league through a playoff, so did them players halfway through a season last year think we're going to be playing in Europe next year? No, realistically, they probably thought they had no chance. Then they go on a dream run in the FAI Cup, beat Derry in the final, and they deserve to be there. Their performances in the Cup and then their performances this season, they've led on from that, has been absolutely incredible. Kevin Doherty has done an immense job, and they should feel hard done by, because it's not their fault that they're not getting the opportunity to play in the European games, and it's a bit of a disgrace, and this is some boys' livelihoods. Like, there's potential earnings there for lads in European games that they would never get the opportunity to earn playing in the League of Ireland, and that's after being taken away from them now, and it's not fair, Raf. And as I said, Kevin Doherty's done an amazing job, and he's going to have a really uphill battle now, I think, on his hands. We're having to galvanise and motivate the players. You'd like to think it'd be pretty easy that the lads would go on and do a job, but subconsciously they're going to be thinking, when the draw is done today, when the games are on in July, we should be out there, and all of a sudden now they've no game. They'll probably have a weekend off. Listen, it's really disappointing, but as I said, they have two decisions to make now. The players do. They either say, all right, it's going to hinder our performances and we can let get our heads down, or else they can say, do you know what, let's use this to our advantage. We're going to be fresh. We're not going to have any games. Let's rest, recuperate, and be ready to attack the league, because we see the performances that they've put in. They're up there on merit, and hopefully, if they keep going the way they are, they will be in Europe next season. Do you know what I mean? So that's the options that they have at the moment.
Yeah, and Keith, I know obviously as a former player at the club as well, I imagine you'll have a huge amount of sympathy for them as well. But like the way they did, they might have lost to Shamrock Rovers, but over the weekend, if you were watching and you didn't know there was this kind of cloud hanging over them, you probably wouldn't necessarily notice over the way they they picked up a point, obviously against Pats as well. Like Kevin Doherty definitely got something out of them.
Yeah, and it's huge credit to Kevin Doherty for, especially last night when the lads just found out that they were out of Europe, and then they've got to go and take on the mighty Shamrock Rovers. And the fact that he took the lead in that game shows you that they are trying to galvanise. They are a tight group, but it just seems like they're being kicked from every single angle, Raf. They find out yesterday early on that they're not going to be in Europe, yet they've got to play the game because they're in Europe. And you're thinking, well, if you're not in Europe, why are you playing that game? It just seems absolutely nonsensical. I believe that the coefficient is still going to be divided by 4 rather than 3, which is, again, absolutely nonsensical. How hard would it be to divide by 3 rather than 4? Makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. And look, Raf, I wouldn't be, very well versed in this sort of stuff, but is it not as simple as keeping Drogheda away from Silkeborg? Yeah. I mean, it's very rare. I wouldn't imagine they're going to get each other in the final. They're two lower ranked teams. I don't see the big hullabaloo of it all, and my heart is absolutely broken for Kevin Doherty and them players, because to go out and win the FAI Cup against all the odds with, we can speak about the finances, the size of the clubs that they played against to get there. They've earned the right to be in Europe, and because of a silly technicality off the field, they're not going to play. And it's heartbreaking.
Those Barry, just in terms of the game itself, so 2-1 defeat for Drogheda there against Shamrock Rovers, who are continuing to, the momentum is certainly with them up at the top. But something Kevin Doherty referenced there in his answer was, I think, alluding to the Shamrock Rovers equaliser, which I think you'd need about 5 or 6 replays to actually know what happened, because there was no reaction from anybody, not even Neil Doyle, the referee, or the Shamrock Rovers players, the Shamrock Rovers fans. But you were in the stadium, and it was more a case of go and watch replays before you find out why the free kick actually was a legitimate one to give.
No one had a clue what was happening, Raf. No one had a clue. It happened down the end, the Windmill Road end. So just in front of the away fans, the Shamrock Rovers fans, they did not make so much as a squeak in terms of calling for it. No Rovers players made any real call for it. Andy Quinn, you could see when the whistle went and Neil Doyle pointed for the free kick that he was absolutely stunned. And you can often tell a lot from a player's reaction. I was up in the stand and I needed to look at the replay 4 or 5 times before I actually was able to go, oh, it might have struck his hand. Now, after the game, Kevin Doherty was adamant it didn't touch his hand. It might have flicked his finger, maybe. Andy Quinn was adamant as well, it didn't touch it. But yeah, look, it went that way. Kevin was absolutely fuming after the game. I think it was a build-up of emotion as well. It was obviously a very emotive night and things got the better of him. There was a lot of shouting and finger wagging at full time. His goalkeeping coach, Aaron Shanahan, got sent off as well. So it got a bit testy towards the end after 90 minutes of a match when Drogheda just felt everything Neil Doyle was doing was going against them. But in terms of the overall game itself, like, it was actually eerie how similar it was to the last time Rovers played Drogheda, Sullivan and Lamb Park, back in March. So in that game, Drogheda took the lead through a centre half, and then Shamrock Rovers came from behind to score through Burke and Green to win 2-1. So exactly the same in both games. So a real sense of deja vu. And I actually just thought it was interesting there, listening to those Kevin Doherty quotes as well. He talked about people looking at the footage of that free kick for the equaliser that Graham Burke scored, and talking about the judge, jury and executioner. Like, that's twice in one day that the jury hasn't gone in Drogheda's favour. I can just imagine how painful that must be for Kevin. In terms of Rovers, I think it's unbeaten in 10 games now, 7 wins in that stretch. They made 7 changes from the game against Shells at Tolka on Friday. To be able to bring in Dylan Watts, Lee Grace, Graham Burke, Trevor Clark, Aaron Green, it just shows that they are far and away above anyone else in this league in terms of squad depth and in terms of just the strength that they have. When you play Shamrock Rovers, it's the toughest game any team will have in this league, home or away.
Yeah, and Richie, just looking at the 2 results, 2-1 wins on the road, at first against Shelburne and then against Drogheda United then last night. When, and it's very noticeable, the winning goals are coming in the second half, where the depth and the ability to grind down teams is quite evident. But when you look at them, and kind of knowing Stephen Bradley as well as you do, and the staff and the players, if they're looking at those performances as well as the results have been, are there issues that they'd be still looking to iron out over for the next few weeks?
I don't think so, Raf. Look, I think at the moment they're in cruise control. They're absolutely cruising it. To be honest, I said it a couple of weeks ago that they were my favourites to win it. I think they have one hand on it already, to be honest. And not just based on how good they are. I don't think any other team is good enough to catch them. You have Bohemians who are the closest to them. Now they have a couple of games in hand. Maybe they can put up a small bit of a title challenge, but for the rest of them, like, you see Shells, you see Pats. I don't think any of them have the quality or the confidence to go on the proper run and try and challenge Shamrock Rovers. And as Barry was talking about there, you see the depth that's in the squad. I even know there's some lads can't get into the squad that would walk into probably any other team in the league, which is absolutely crazy. So listen, Shamrock Rovers are in absolute cruise control at the moment. Obviously they can see it from a set piece. Listen, no manager's going to be happy with that. Everybody's going to be designated their men and designated their areas to go and attack. So they'll probably be a little bit disappointed with that, but they'll be more impressed by how they came back, especially against Drogheda up there, because I've played up there a number of times and it's a really, really tough place to go, especially when you're playing against Kevin Doherty's side and they take the lead. As soon as they take the lead, they kind of shut up shop at the back And it was probably a little bit of fortune that Shamrock Rovers really needed, because if they go in 1-0 down at half time, it might be a completely different outlook on the second half. Drogheda might take a little bit of a bigger step backwards, defend their box a little bit better, but they got the help that they needed. And as Barry said, Kevin Doherty is having 2 sucker punches over the last couple of days, so you feel for him at the moment, you do. But listen, I've no doubt that they'll be back bigger, better and stronger.
Yeah, for sure. And in terms of the Shells game for Shamrock Rovers as well, we've talked a lot about Josh Honan here. He had a great game last night, but then he's had a roller coaster few weeks, and that game in a nutshell was a bit of a roller coaster for him as well.
I know. I think you see all the emotions caught up, even when he scored the winner. Normally a player will go off and celebrate. Dublin derby, he's after getting his first call up into the Ireland squad, but you could see probably the weight on his shoulders. He scores the goal and he just stands there, he does, and he's probably just thinking, we need a break here. He obviously scored the own goal, which is really unfortunate, and probably just as well he did score the own goal for Shelbourne's point of view, because I think they only had 1 shot on target in the whole game, Raf. I know we'll probably go on to the Pats game as well. They only had 1 shot on target in the Pats game, which is absolutely crazy when you think about the reigning champions at home in a Dublin derby, and they needed to go out and put a big statement down against Shamrock Rovers and be like, no, we're here and we're going to fight till the end to retain our title. But they kind of just gave it to them. They did on the day. Rovers were in, as I said, cruise control in that game as well. They dominated from start to finish. Shelbourne really disappointing on the day. Now they obviously bounced back with a great win in Richmond, but I think there's a lot of work to do for Damien Duff with his Shelbourne side. As I said, 1 shot on target in 2 games is absolutely crazy. It is, if you want to go and win a league title. Yeah,
and speaking of Damien Duff, he was speaking to Tony O'Donoghue last night, as was Stephen Kenny. So let's listen to them. So this is after Shelbourne beats St. Pat's 1-0 with Ali Coote scoring, or finishing off a really good team move in the 10th minute.
It was a tale of 2 halves, but I think when you dissect it, it's why we deserve to win the game. And what do I mean by that? First half, outstanding with the ball, amazing quality, playing through them at will, and a brilliant reaction and mindset from the guys attacking the game. From that attacking point of view, wanting the ball, so absolutely deserved to go 1-0 in, 1-0 up at half time, Tony. And then the second half, we couldn't string 2 passes together. Let's call a spade a spade. But it's the other side of us, and it's the other side of how you win games. Working hard for each other, running hard for each other, putting your body on the line. It's very simple.
Yeah, obviously, I'm just pointed about a year ago, so we're a year unbeaten, and here, so we're disappointed to lose that record. Very disappointed, because as you say, the second half was absolute waves of attack, and we just couldn't get the goal that we deserved.
Every game is becoming really difficult here as well. As you mentioned, Galway away now next Friday. That's certainly not a gimme.
Yeah, Galway away, and then Derry here on Monday, and then we're away to Cork on Friday. So that's the nature of it now in this period, and we've not had a good weekend, so we need to bounce back on Friday.
Right, so that is St. Pat's manager Stephen Kenny, and before that Damien Duff. So just continuing on with Shells first before we get to Pat's, Richie. So Sean Boyd is back as well, which is kind of interesting. He started last night. He came off the bench in the previous game against Shamrock Rovers. Meepo, it seems to be sort of, I don't think he came on last night, but he did come on the previous time. So they're still trying to find a right mix there up front.
Listen, I think if Sean Boyd is fit, he's going to be the main man. Anytime I watch Shelbourne play and he's not in the team, they really struggle, because they don't have that vocal point up front where, listen, if obviously Shelbourne are a really progressive team, the way they play football, they like to get the ball, play it out from the back, and it was summed up in the goal that they scored against St. Pat's, which was an incredible goal. I know I was being a bit hard on them previously about not getting enough shots on target and stuff like that, but the goal that they scored against Pats was of a real high quality. They walked them side to side, then Mark Coyle penetrates through the middle, so really good goal, which Damien will be absolutely delighted with, I'm sure. But as soon as the likes of Sean Boyd is not in the team and Paddy Barrett, they seem a bit soft. They seem to go behind in games, and then they're always playing catch up there, where if they have them two in the team, I think they're the real leaders in the dressing room, as we were talking about earlier with Keith, about lads who you can see who are real vocal in the dressing room. They would most definitely be two of them. So to have them back in the squad and back starting, it's going to be really, really important for Shelbourne going forward.
Yeah, and then from the Pats' point of view, Keith, so it's not been a great weekend. So no goals against Drogheda or Shells, and usually home advantage has been quite good for them this season, and that didn't really pan out. And it just seems there's a weird flatness to it.
Yeah, there's a weird flatness to it, Raf, because some of the players are really, really flat at the minute. The first 45 minutes last night was really poor from a St. Pat's point of view. Duffer was saying there that Shelbourne couldn't string a pass together in the second half. That was the total flip of the first half. Shelbourne were really good. But look, you're going to have times, and I've spoke about Stephen Kenny's game plan and how intricate it is and how you have to be playing well to be able to implement it. You know, it's so difficult. The pass completion percentage must have been so low in that first half. And the one thing that really gets me as well, when Mark Coyle picks up the ball for the Shelbourne goal, he's in and around the halfway line, and the Pats team is just absolutely wide open. You've got to force people around you rather than through you, and that's the sort of stuff you learn at under 15 level, Raf. You've got to force them around you. They can't come through you. Mark Coyle runs from the halfway line to the edge of the 18-yard box before he's engaged by somebody. That can't happen. It cannot happen. And there's a cross in, it gets brought back in, and Ali Coote with a nice finish. But they had Jamie Lennon and McClellan as the two holding midfielders yesterday, and it just didn't work. The two of them were going missing. Lennon has way too much to do. McClellan wants to go and get involved in the build-up play. In the second half, to be fair to Stephen Kenny, he took Ando Breslin off, he took McLaughlin off, because it just wasn't working. Mulroney also come off. Mulroney is one that, you know, he can be the winning of a game for you, but he can also be the losing of a game. And this is what I keep trying to get into Pat's players, every player, wingers in particular. Just going to be days when you're not having a good day, when technically you're a bit off it, but you've got to run like your life depends on it. And so many of these Pat's players, for me, when they're not technically on it, they just decide, oh, well, I'm not going to have a good day, then run harder. You know, it has to be, I'll work harder if I'm not on it. Having said that, the second 45 minutes was a lot better, Raf. I think it would have been a fair draw if Pats had been able to get the draw. But Aidan Keena has 1 goal in his last 9. El Bezebi has 3 goals this season. Keane Levy has 1 in his last 7 games. The boys that you wanted to come to the party and get Pats moving forward, the wingers, although they've had little flashes, it hasn't been enough. It hasn't been constant enough. And the wingers for me have been really poor. Aidan Keane has come off the boil. Mason Mealy has all the pressure in the world on him, and he's doing well with it, the young lad, but he's still learning on the job. Pats, the home form hasn't been bad, but when they go away from home, in particular, they're really, really poor. So, look, I hotly tipped Pats at the start of the season to go and win it. I jumped off probably about 3 weeks ago, Raf. I seen the iceberg coming and I've jumped, and I'm firmly in the Shamrock Rovers camp now, because I think Pats just, there's not enough there.
Yeah, Raf, just to touch on what Keith said with Mark Coyle driving straight through the middle, and it's like the Red Sea, it just opening up for him. The exact same thing happened against Shamrock Rovers when Graham Burke picked up the ball in his own half, dribbled the whole way, no Pats player came near him, and he took a shot and scored. Surely the coaching staff and manager there, that's spoke about then on the Monday morning, this can never happen again. And it's 3 weeks later, and the exact same thing has happened again. So that's where the big problems are for Pats at the moment. When you see consistent mistakes happening, simple ones that you, as Keith said, you should be getting taught at under 12s, 13s, 14s, that just shouldn't happen. A player going straight through the middle of the pitch and having a shot or creating a goal, that just can't happen. And it's just happening too many times for Pats. That's why they're in the position they are.
I think as well with Pats, my issue is recently with them, if you look at the Drogheda game, I was at that on Friday night. It's the variety in their attacking play, I think, is really, really lacking. So that's the 3rd straight 0-0 draw they've had with Drogheda. 5 of the last 7 have been 0-0 draws. They keep doing the same thing. They keep just trying to get it out wide and put crosses into the box. That is exactly what Drogheda want. That's what Conor Keeley wants. And Stephen Kenny should know that. They've got 3 centre-halves there, and they are happy to just come and head the ball all day long. And that's what Pats kept doing and kept doing and kept doing. On the opening night of the season, Pats put 40 crosses into the box. And Drogheda just kept pinging them back out again. And the same was the case on Friday night. And I just don't think there's enough variety there. He's picking Cian Levy a lot recently, and I do like Cian Levy as a player, but obviously Brandon Kavanagh was someone who was so big for them last year. He's gone off the boil. He's not starting as many games and having as much of an impact now this year. And I just think their lack of a threat, as Keith said, is a big issue for them as well.
Yeah, and just moving on, obviously Pats are going to be in the Conference League draw as well, which is happening very, very soon as well. We will talk more about that next week. Shells as well, unseated in the first round of the Champions League. Shamrock Rovers, because of Drogheda being excluded from the UEFA Conference League, they're going straight into the second round in their stead as well. But we'll chat about all that next week. Derry City against Galway United, that was a 1-1 draw, and I suppose, Keith, Derry couldn't, once they got the equaliser, they didn't seem to be able to press on whatever momentum they had. And what did you make of the penalty as well, the one that Mark Connolly was adjudged to have pulled down Moses Dyer?
It was one of them. As soon as you're always asking the referee a question, aren't you, when you start doing them type of things in the box? If it had been let go, I don't think too many people would have batted an eyelid. The fact that it's been given, again, it's pretty like the Shamrock Rovers free kick. When you're looking and you're thinking you're going through it with a fine tooth comb, you end up finding something. But again, people have said to me, can Derry be the ones? And I would echo what Richie has said about Bows. Bows have already lost 8 games this season, and they will lose another handful between now and the end. So I don't see them being the ones to give us a title race. They're obviously the closest at the minute. But look, Derry, very good chances, but they just don't seem ruthless enough. They get a whole host of chances. They hit the back of the net once. And even the goal, I think it was Greg Cunningham came across to try and get rid of it, and it hits Holt in the chest and ends up in the back of the net. So it wasn't any sort of great play from Derry or brilliant design that they go and score a goal. And yeah, I don't know. I'm still a little bit worried with the attacking players. I know Michael Duffy is somebody that everybody raves about in the League of Ireland, and I'm a big fan of his as well, but I don't think he's enough. Liam Boyce has come to the party, scored a few goals, but I don't think they have enough firepower, Raf. And again, I hate bringing up the Astro, but I think the Astro does eventually work against them. But that second half, Derry and Galway, the two teams had a combined XG of 0.07 in the second 45 minutes. So I think we'll just forget all about the second 45 minutes.
I don't think you need to be. Well, I think the leaving sight's on at the moment, isn't it? I don't think you need to. You don't need to be doing, a higher level maths to know that that's not a good combination of a number. Yeah. And Galway have brought in a new striker, Trinidad and Tobago international Malcolm Shaw as well. Came on for the last couple of minutes on Friday night. Now the other game, Bohemians won 2-0 away at Cork City. So Bows are closest to Shamrock Rovers, as was said there. And the one thing though, Richie, is that Sean Green, his loan is finished, and he had been so important to them as well in terms of what he did defensively.
Yeah, he's going to be a big miss for them, Raf. Not just defensively. He scored some really important goals for them, he did. And not just that, it was his play out from the back. He was, for someone at such a young age, he was a real calm one in the defence. He was the one who played the balls between the lines into the likes of Tierney and Devoy. So yeah, they're going to really, really struggle to replace him there. As I said, he came up with some important goals. His defensive duties, he was incredible at doing. So yeah, a player like that going out the door. Obviously, Stevie O'Donnell and the manager, they're going to have some time now to try and replace him. But it's going to be really hard.
Yeah, and from the Cork City point of view, some of the goals they conceded were, it was quite poor from their point of view. Probably quite easy, it seemed, in the way Archie Meekison was able to get lots of space for the first run for his goal, and then the intercept as well for one of the other ones. But I suppose, Barry, there's a wider context here for Cork City as well that you were keen to bring up, which was something Dan McDonald was reporting on. But it was just maybe when we look at the attendances, they've kind of dipped in their home games quite recently, which isn't a great sign. And obviously ticket prices are another sort of aspect of this as well.
Yeah, there's been a quite a worrying drop off at Cork, to be honest. They're about 500-600 down recent home games as opposed to the start of the season. So before the start of the season, Dermot Usher, the owner, actually put the ticket prices up. Obviously, we're at a situation now in the League of Ireland where clubs are trying to capitalise on interest and filling out grounds and all that kind of stuff. Cork are not doing that at the moment. Now, of course, they're bottom of the table at the moment, and as is often the case with virtually every club in the league, if you're not winning games and you're not performing and you're not putting on something worth going to see, there will be a certain section of fans who will stay away. But certainly, there's a feeling in Cork that supporters are staying away because of that ticket price hike. They felt it was unwarranted down at Turner's Cross, and yeah, it's the relationship that Dermot Usher has with the supporters there is quite tentative. There's a little bit of unrest down there. They've become a yo-yo club in recent years. They've been up and down. Colin Healy took them up. Tim Clancy took them up. Unless something changes in a major way, they'll be back down in the First Division next year. And for a club of their size, they really should be, establishing themselves, or looking to establish themselves back as a force in the Premier Division. And they're not doing so. And I think there's major question marks about just the hierarchy there and the investments and decision-making processes at the club at the moment. There's a huge, I suppose, fan base and potential fan base in Cork for football. It's a big, soccer county. In fairness, there are, of course, hurling and Gaelic football, but look, it's a massive football town, football city, and they're really just not fulfilling, their potential at the moment.
Yeah, and I suppose, Keith, they would have been very disappointed as well to see Sligo, who had been below them, winning 1-0 thanks to Wilson Guerrero against Waterford as well. And this was huge for Sligo, on top of it with the clean sheet and the way they actually constructed that goal as well.
Yeah, it was really good, and it felt like an absolute massive game. I know mathematically Cork and Sligo look like the two are going to be battling it out for the automatic relegation, but I really like John Russell. I like the way he goes about it. And so many of the players over the years at Sligo have been cherry picked, or he've gone across the water to England or to other clubs. But they just kept trucking along. I thought the goal they scored was brilliant. When you look at Sligo, we always look at teams and think defensively they let in an awful lot of goals. So you're thinking, is there somebody there that can be the one to score the goals? And Owen Elding is the one who's popped his head to the forefront. He's brilliant little player. The more I see of him, the more I like. He seems capable of doing a little bit of everything, puts his foot in and works hard. And as you said, we're aware as well as somebody who has a little bit about him. So, look, I think Sligo and Cork are in a straight shoot-off here. Cork don't need to get too bogged down in it. I think it's so strange. I know they've gone into the Premier Division, Cork, and the prices have gone up, but they're in a dogfight now to stay in the league. And, the more bodies in coming to watch the games, the better for the players. So, yeah, the Cork fans really, really need to get behind that team because, like you said, I think Barry could be spot on that he could go straight back down. But, all they have to do is finish ahead of Sligo and get into the playoffs and back themselves there. So it's very, very simple stuff. Try and stay in the league, but they need an atmosphere. They need Cork to become a fortress, and Sligo the same. So Sligo obviously getting that great win against Waterford, so they will have that little bit of confidence. Yeah, it's a straight shootout. We seem to be taking shape at the back and taking shape at the front. Now it seems to be about the European race.
Yeah, and then Waterford as well, Richie, when you look at where they are, so they have 8 points of a gap above Sligo and then 10 to Cork, so there probably won't be a huge amount of panic there, but then they have Bows at home, Shells at home, and then Shamrock Rovers away before the end of this month, so there won't be any nervousness straight away, but that is a tough run that's coming up now.
Yeah, look, John Coleman will be very realistic and think it's going to be hard to get points from any of them games he will. So going down, playing Sligo in the form that they were in, they probably would have been looking to get minimum a draw. They were obviously unlucky. John Matton actually made an incredible tackle after about 5 or 6 minutes to keep the ball out of the back of the net. It looked like a tap in for the Waterford player. And then obviously on the flip side, then you have someone like Padraig Gammon giving the ball away uncharacteristically. And then it was great. Listen, it was great play from Sligo, and Warrior, you could see the confidence that he kind of had even before that. He had a chance. He tried a bicycle kick, and when you see someone that's trying to do a bicycle kick in a game, you think, right, this lad, he has a bit of confidence in him today, and then he goes and takes his goal really well. He's been someone who's been in and out of the team a little bit this year, missed a few games through injury. So if they're to have, as Keith said, the likes of Elding and Waweru, I think if they keep them, two of them fit, they could have enough just to nick the playoff spot, because at the moment, Cork City look absolutely disastrous at the moment to do. Every time I watch them play, they're really struggling there. Jay Nash has a really big hand on a job in his hand down there. So, look, it's going to make for a really, really interesting next couple of weeks. So, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and then the First Division, Athlone and Kerry drew 2-2. Finn Harps and Wexford, a 1-1 draw there. Treaty United beat Bray Wanderers 2-1. Dundalk and UCD drew 1-1, and then it was a 1-1 draw also on Saturday night between Longford Town and Cove Ramblers, which means actually none of the top three in the division got victories at all. Some of the other bits of news: former Bray boss Ian Ryan is now the Athlone Town manager, having done well previously at Wexford, and a decent start for him with Cole Omar Hawaiian's late week equaliser against Kerry as well. Some of the goals to look out for, if you're looking through the highlights: Lee Devitt for Treaty United, his opener against Bray was really good. It was part one of a brace for him in that game. And then Gavin Gilmore's running cross to Grady Lomboat over Finn Harps' equaliser against Wexford as well was really well taken. Just from a Dundalk point of view, Richie, just J.R. Wilson's after signing for Dundalk. So one of those 5 players that was mentioned as being released by Athlone recently. So what do you expect him to bring to the club?
Yeah, he's someone who's played at a higher level. I'm sure Kieran, well, I actually know Kieran Kilduff. He tried to sign him in the off season, and JR obviously made the decision to go elsewhere. He did. So I'm sure he's delighted to get his man in the door, someone that he tried to get previously that he probably thought he wouldn't have another opportunity to get. So, yeah, look, JR has played at a higher level. He's played in the Premier Division on numerous occasions. So not just someone for this year. I think Kieran Kilduff is probably looking a little bit down the line as well, that if they do get promoted, that they have a player there that's already been there and done it and has that experience that can step straight into the Premier Division and play as well. So yeah, look, it's a really good signing, and Dundalk is obviously, listen, they'd be disappointed drawing against UCD, especially with the form UCD are at been in over the last couple of weeks, but they'd be still delighted with how they're doing overall this season.
Yeah, just on the Wilson, Raf, if I can. Yeah. I think the back four for Dundalk on Friday night was very young. I think, if I'm right in saying, all academy products. So someone like Wilson, as Richie says, will bring, much needed experience to that. It's quite an experienced team higher up the pitch with the likes of Dervin and Daryl Horgan and people like that, even Dean Ebb. But at the back, they're probably lacking a little bit. So I think it's an important signing for them.
Yeah, they have a 6-point gap over Cove Ramblers at the moment, and then Bray Wanderers are 8 points off the summit, and then you've got a clutch of teams sort of in that playoff race with Wexford sort of at the bottom of that in 6th place. But for now, thanks to you lads for coming on today. And now the girls in green will be playing the home leg of their Nations League playoff against Belgium at the Aviva in October, as confirmed today. But on Monday, I spoke to Shelbourne's Rachel Graham, and if you looked out the window on Monday, if you were in Dublin, it was far different to what Saturday was like when Rachel's top of the table clash against Athlone Town fell foul of the elements.
Yeah, obviously, look, our game didn't go ahead Saturday, but like I was saying, I woke up early Saturday morning, I could hear the rain bashing off the window, and you kind of, Tolga is probably not the best pitch in the world for the drainage. And then I checked the weather app and it wasn't due to stop. And then, of course, that video kind of started circulating of the puddles basically, and I kind of knew, look, there was a pitch inspection, but I think we knew before then that it wasn't going to go ahead.
Yeah, so this was, of course, the SSE or Treacy Women's Premier Division fixtures on Saturday. All the games in Dublin pretty much were postponed due to the rain, except DLR Waves, the Sligo Rovers, but that was actually played out in Bray in the Carlisle grounds. And so Shelbourne Athlone, so your game called off, which was, of course, one I think people were massively anticipating, given it's a top of the table clash. Shamrock Rovers against Waterford also off, and Peamount against Bowes, all falling foul of the weather. So the games that did go ahead were Cork City losing 4-2 at home to Galway United, Wexford winning 4-1 at Treaty, and of course DLR Waves with the first victory of the season, 1-0 over Sligo Rovers. We'll talk about all of those very shortly, but for yourselves, in terms of, you've been building, and we were talking about it on the podcast last week, you've been building towards this Athlone game, and it had been on the horizon for a long time. How difficult is that sort of to deal with it, or is it a thing of just like you kind of park it and then you switch focus to your next game, which is Sligo?
Yeah, look, obviously we were really looking forward to the game. We're in good form going into it, and our week's training had been built solely around that game, and good week's training. But look, I just think, we live in a country where this happens often enough. I just think you can't dwell on it. It's obviously disappointing. We're really looking forward to playing, but I just think you can't get caught up in these kind of things. It is what it is, basically. And look, we'll just switch now to Sligo when the game hasn't been really fixed, but it's important now that we just keep ourselves in good form going into the game. But look, obviously hugely disappointed, but I just think you can't overthink it, you can't dwell on it, you just take it for what it is and you move on.
Yeah, and it's not too long ago you actually played Sligo in another competition, the All-Ireland Cup, and it was a fairly comprehensive victory. But is it tricky kind of meeting a team that quickly again, whether when there's only been a couple of weeks played, because they'll have had that sense of kind of getting used to playing against you.
Yeah, and look, obviously the last game went really well for us, so they might set up a bit differently where they, go a bit more defensive and harder to break down. So look, I think for us it's just important that we don't, focus on our last game against them. That was an All-Ireland Cup game, and teams make some changes, and even the feeling of the games are just never the same as a league game. So I think the big thing for us is just not having any sort of complacency going in, thinking that it's going to be as easy of a game as it was when we played them previously 2 weeks ago. So for us, it's switch on now for Sligo. It's going to be a much tougher game for us, and look, we need to keep ourselves in winning ways, and this is definitely 3 points that we need to be getting if we want to win a league.
Yeah, and then Athlone as well. They're playing Peamount and they're at home, so they will be favourites. Of course, they're in great form as well. But it's a tricky game also on paper in many ways. Obviously, Peamount have a great tradition.
Yeah, and Peamount have proven to be a difficult team for Athlone in the past. They've won a couple of games against them. So even if you're looking at Peamount now, they're 7th in the league, and after this weekend, look, for most teams, it's going to be one full round of fixtures, and if their Peamount are in 7th, they're starting to slip away. So look, they've two games in hand over some teams, one game in hand over some others. So look, they're not a club that want to be slipping down the table, being in 7th. So it's a big game for them. And look, Athlone obviously in flying form. They're a week without a game as well. So look, it could go either way. It's proven a tough game for Athlone in the past, and yeah, look, it's obviously Athlone our favourites, but I think for these types of games, if you look at the table, obviously Athlone's our favourite, but if you're going off past results, it could be a tight game.
Yeah, and then Sligo as well, just to go back to them and the results of the weekend. So as I mentioned, they lost 1-0, or they lost 1-0 at DLR Waves, but that's a particularly huge result at the bottom, but particularly for Waves as well, who have struggled largely this season.
Yeah, look, and Sligo have struggled as well, but DLR were without a win for pretty much up until that game, obviously, and you could see how much it meant to them at the final whistle. And look, I think sometimes people forget that we're all, well, majority are amateur and we're working or they're going to school, and it's a lot to give up your time as well. It's a big commitment. So when you're doing that every week, 3 nights a week, training and playing a match at the weekend, and you just can't seem to win a game or even draw a game, it can become very disheartening. So I think for them it was brilliant, and they'd had a draw the week before, and then that young girl Amber Cullen came on last week for her debut and then scored with her first touch to get them their first win. So she's obviously high as a kite at the moment. But look, we're not, we don't want to see big defeats in the league. We don't want to see a team that can't win a game. So I think overall for the league, it was a good result, and even for them, it's brilliant for a bit of motivation for the next few weeks.
Yeah, and then Galway also getting back to winning ways, but defensively still, and something we talked about, they don't seem to keep clean sheets, and even the first goal they conceded against Cork on Saturday was kind of a little bit on the soft side.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we highlight about Galway, was their inability to keep a clean sheet. And I think if you want to win leagues, you need to be able to keep clean sheets. But for them, I think, they've had 3 defeats in a row in the league. And for them who were considered title challengers, it's I'm not saying anyway it's done and dusted, but that's a big blow, losing 3 games in a row. So I think it was just important that they got back to a winning way. And look, it looks probably a bit easier on paper for 2, but the game was, 1-0, 1-1, 2-0, 2-2, and then they obviously went 3-1 up around the 60th minute, and then it wasn't until late on that they got the 4th. So the game wasn't done and dusted. It was still a tough win for them. So yeah, for them, I think going forward, obviously want to be keeping more clean sheets, conceding less goals. But I think the most important thing for them at the weekend was just getting back to winning ways.
Yeah, and then Galway have Waterford and Sligo next, and then obviously there's a cup game with yourselves in between, but there's a chance for them, at least in the league, with those fixtures on paper. It looks like maybe they could rebuild a bit of momentum.
Yeah, and look, they're the games where you kind of need to be picking up the points if you want to stay at the top, because, we're at the halfway point now and the games start running out pretty quickly. We don't have that many games that we play. So even 1 or 2 losses, you can find yourself dropping down, and the games run out where you can claw these games back or get points back. So yeah, for them, I think the next couple of weeks they want to be getting wins on the board, and then if they can focus on keeping clean sheets, then that's second to getting the win.
Yeah, and then the long range goals. This is the Ava Mullins one as well, like just against the keeper Una Foyle. So it's great finish in one ways, but is it a kind of hard one to judge as well, because maybe is it one that the keeper could have done better just with the area of the goal where it actually went in?
Yeah, and look, we probably see a lot of these goals, if we're being honest, in our league. We had some against Sligo, and look, just by nature, women are smaller than men, and it's harder to get that height when you're jumping backwards, especially as well. So look, in a Galway perspective, it's a great finish, a great goal. But I think for Cork, if someone's shooting from that distance or any team shooting from that distance, we would hope that the keeper can, save it or even, just get some sort of hand to it. But yeah, I think whatever way you look at it, Galway go goal, but I think Cork will be disappointed.
Yeah, and I think the keeper is also facing into the sun as well, so that might have been another factor. The other game as well, Wexford against Treacy, so huge win for Wexford, and they just seem to be quietly, apart from the game they played against yourselves and they lost quite heavily, apart from that they seem to be kind of driving along pretty nicely at this stage.
Yeah, and their last league game was obviously against us, and we had a good win, and it was probably out of character for them, and they had been doing really well up until then, so it was probably just a bit of a blip in the road. And then, Treaty away is a tough game, and we had a tough game. We went down, and look, at 4-1 win is a great result away from home to any team, but I think for them getting back on track like Galway, it's, they're kind of third and fourth at the moment, and you don't want to drift off each other. Look, they don't want to drift off ourselves in that long, but again, for that third spot, you don't want to be drifting away and find yourself down fifth, sixth, seventh, because pretty similar to the men's league, it's quite tight, and one or two good results can get you up and one or two bad results can find you down. So look, again, like Galway, just great for them to get back to a win away.
Yeah, and also this week or last week, sorry, the squad for the friendlies against the USA, which are going to be taking place in Colorado and Ohio, were named. So the first game against the US will be in Commerce City, which is sort of around the Denver area, so in Colorado, and then 3 days later on the 29th of June, the second game in Cincinnati will take place. So the squad, I think had already been flagged. Katie McCabe would be rested after a long season. Jamie Finn, who you had spoken about last week, she didn't make it in this time. And then also Aoife Mannion, Leanne Kiernan, Liag, Heather Payne are among those that are also not in it. But someone you did talk about a few weeks back who you were keen to see get into the squad. And speaking of Wexford, Ellen Malloy, a huge opportunity for her to, I suppose, show Carla Ward what she's about.
Yeah, huge opportunity. And, she's someone we spoke about in the past where she's that real kind of, special player. She has loads of ability, loads of talent, and it's someone that, we want to get the best out of in an Ireland jersey as well. We want to see her playing for Ireland, and probably hasn't happened as much for her as, her talent shows. But yeah, look, it's obviously great to have representation in the league. She's been flying in the league and scored again at the weekend. So look, she's someone that is very special. She can, get you a goal out of nothing. She can dribble by players, 3 or 4 players, and get a goal. So for us, she could be huge, but it's just about getting her into that environment. And look, she obviously went away and went professional, and just either wasn't the right time or wasn't the right move, and she's back in Ireland now. So someone that might need to be maybe challenged a bit more, whether she plays or trains with a boys team 1 or 2 nights a week on top of her Wexford training. But if anything we could do to nurture her, I think to get her in and around the Ireland squad, because she's someone that, you can't really coach for her talent. She's someone that's, a natural ability. And look, I hope, the camp goes really well for her. It'd be great to see her get some game time. I'd imagine the fact that it's 2 friendlies, we'll probably see everyone playing. So hopefully she can go on and impress Carla.
Yeah, and the rest of the squad is largely, obviously, apart from the aforementioned Katie McCabe, it's largely quite settled. So it's a good opportunity to just, I suppose, get that or kind of grow the cohesion again. But and also Hayley Nolan is in there as well. Seems to have done really well at Crystal Palace this past season, even though they did get relegated in the end.
Yeah, like she's appeared a lot for Crystal Palace this year. She started 10 of their games, which is, pretty much half of their games. We would have seen her in previous squads under Eileen. Not didn't think this is her first call up under Carla Ward. So again, a good defensive player, good centre half. It's probably what we're producing a lot of at the moment. Yeah, look, great for her to get an opportunity. It's tough being in and out of squads, even for her. So a great opportunity for her. But look, it's 2 really tough games to go and try and impress. So I think more so you might be impressing in training sessions or whatever they do outside of the 2 games, because look, we know we're going to be up against it. It's probably not going to be an opportunity where we're going to play loads of football against the USA. So if you can impress in training, and then if you do get on the pitch, do whatever you can. It's playing against world number 1. It's not the game you want to go on and try and impress the manager, but whatever you can do in training, I'd say, is what's going to be best for her.
Yeah, I suppose finally, a few players without clubs at the moment, but we've known that Grace Maloney is still unattached. Megan Campbell, as we talked about, after being released by London City Lionesses, and then the latest player to be released from a club is also just been released by Crystal Palace, which is Izzy Atkinson, and she is in the squad. She's obviously been capped multiple times as well. Where would you expect her to sort of show up, I suppose, once when she does find a club again? Because she did quite well initially when she went to Crystal Palace.
Yeah, and she's, we spoke about Tyler Towell a few weeks ago, kind of moving around clubs, and she's been pretty similar. She's had 3 clubs since she's gone professional. So look, I haven't heard any sort of rumours or even speaking to people who know her. Like, I don't know of any, possibility where she's going to go. I know Crystal Palace were actually looking to loan her out last year, and it's not something that she wanted to do. So I think no matter where she goes, it's a great opportunity for her, and probably the right time for her now to get more minutes. I mean, she only appeared twice for Crystal Palace, and that totaled of 14 minutes, which is, look, it's nowhere near the level what she needs to be getting. So could be a possibility she goes back to somewhere in Scotland. She played for Celtic previously, or if not, I'd say maybe more so a mid-so table, and the Championship is what's going to be best for her, because I think for her now she just needs to be playing. 14 minutes as a season is just, it's no good for anybody. So yeah, I think wherever she ends up, she doesn't need to be starting or playing 90 minutes every week, but definitely more than 14 minutes over a year.
Yeah, and what's her best role in your view? Is it kind of left back, left wing back, or a bit further forward in terms of, like, in the wing? She's actually named, I think, in the squad, she's listed among the forwards.
Yeah, she's listed as a forward. We've seen her playing left back before. I think she's more of an attacking player. I just don't think she has the, I don't know what to say, the brain of a defender, or just, that awareness of danger. She's more just about getting the ball and attacking. And kind of, we've seen her caught out once or twice in a defensive position. I just don't think it's for her. So I think either left wing, possibly left wing back, but I definitely think left of a front three is probably what suits her best. And just get the ball go. She has blistering pace. She can, a great burst of pace where she can get away from defenders. So I think defensively, she's not built that way. She doesn't think that way. I think she's more about attacking.
All right, well, we'll see what happens in terms of her club career with the coast. We'll be building up to those games against the USA in more detail next week, but that is it for this week's podcast, and it'll be a Tuesday again next week for the next episode as we build up to those back-to-back friendlies in the USA, and also there's a Monday round of action in the SSE or Treacy Men's Premier Division, and a full reaction to this week's draws and pathways for the LOI sides in European qualifiers as well. But Rachel, thanks very much for your time.
No problem, Raf. Thank you.